You're listening to Inside Content, the TV industry podcast. This show is brought to you by 3Vision, a global TV industry consultancy specialising in content acquisition, strategy, research, and business development. Each episode, we give you VIP access to the views and experiences of senior TV executives and discuss the latest TV industry trends and insights.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Content. I'm Toby Russell, CEO of 3Vision, and today we're taking a deep dive into the LA screenings. Joining me is Peter Andrews. After a decade heading up the network programming division at SBS Australia, earlier this year he launched his own new boutique consulting firm, Pilot Season. In this episode, we unpack the LA Screenings Week, how the event has changed over the past decade, and why it's become less about traditional screenings and more about deal-making, networking and market intelligence. We also explore the impact of consolidation, vertical integration and content availability challenges. And we consider how the LA screenings compares with the London screenings in terms of distributor innovation, collaboration and fresh content on offer.
Introducing Video Markets Tracker from 3Vision, your go-to source for global TV data. We offer regularly updated regional and global reports covering pay TV, SVOD, AVOD, and FAST across Africa, MENA, the Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific. Make smarter decisions with insights you can trust. Learn more at 3vision.tv. Now, on to the episode.
Hi, Peter. Welcome to Inside Content.
Hi, Toby. Great to be chatting again.
Yeah, no, it's really great to have you back on the show. When you were on before, obviously you were working at SBS, and now you've launched your own company, Pilot Season. Could you tell us about what the new venture is all about?
I would love to. Thank you again for the opportunity to be on this podcast. I'm an avid listener. I love the fact that you've had such an incredible, diverse array of talent on this, on your podcast. So I'm really, to be honest, I'm very honoured and privileged to be on again. So, little bit of context or backstory is I had the wonderful, incredible opportunity to work at SBS in Australia and head up the content team for 12 years. And I came to a moment late last year where, through the process of a lot of contemplation and thinking is that, what's going to be my next opportunity and challenge? And so I have made this incredible leap into the, into the great unknown. And I have to say that it was a clearly strategic decision to focus on the gaps, or what I felt were the gaps or the opportunities in the market. And, what I identified was create a boutique sort of, very much so, seriously targeted and seriously, evaluate every sort of opportunity that comes or might present itself in terms of bringing our industry into a way of finding new opportunities and really diving deep into the partnerships. So Pilot Season was built from the ground up, and what's happened, since kicking off Pilot Season in sort of February this year is I've felt that I need to now spend a lot more time on the content development side, because I've had some, really good traction in terms of bringing those ideas to partners and streamers and broadcasters and working through that. So yeah, that's where I've sort of come from, a journey through 7, through 10, through SBS, and now to my own sort of, as you said, boutique consultancy that sort of will be bespoke and work with partners on a direct brief, but also be really targeted.
Fantastic. And I think it's great that you've decided to step out and create that venture. And I think it's it's fantastic experience that you have to bring to bear there. When we met up last face to face, it was at the London screenings, and I think you were just getting started there. You already had some clients there, and everything was starting to move. What I was keen to do in this conversation on the show was jump to kind of probably the next big industry event, the LA screenings, which you were at last month, and just kind of focusing on what happened there, and I think one of the interesting things is how that week has changed from what it was like a decade ago. It's a very, very different it's a very different week now, a very different kind of experience, a very different kind of set of discussions that are happening. I mean, I'm really interested to get your perspective on what that evolution has been like, and kind of what it's all about from your point of view now.
Yeah, look, really interesting. I think I'm sure everyone went into the LA screenings with that perspective. Like, what is it going to be for me as a buyer, as a producer, as a distributor, or whatever, or as a studio who are present there in the market? So I think there are a number of different perspectives and angles that you would look at that. But I know, Toby, if your own background, you were heavily involved in the LA screenings years ago, and so
yeah, exactly.
I'm sure,
I was there working for Disney at one stage, early on in my career.
Yeah. So I'm sure you have a perspective of what the LA screenings was then and what it is now. And look, I your question is very pointed in a good way, in that I think that it has evolved incredibly, and I feel like I bring a new perspective to the LA screenings in terms of having quite an objective view this year compared to what I had last year. And right. I give that to your listeners in terms of last year I was a head buyer for SBS in Australia, and we were unencumbered, and we had the ability to go in and buy whatever show was available that wasn't spoken for, that was available on the market, that hadn't been pre-bought or wasn't already what we'd say, I don't want to speak too much jargon, but wasn't vertically integrated into into a studio's own streaming service. So last year I put myself in that, I was in that position where I was curious about what was available and what we could buy and what was right for our audience and what was right for our platform and our strategy. But this year I went in with a completely open mind, because I had no need to, from a business perspective, I had no need to deliver a certain ROI or deliver certain content back to the business as a result of attending the LA screenings. And that gave me an incredibly objective view. And I think you can ask anyone about this anyway, but I think the screenings has evolved incredibly, where it's now, I think, a market where buyers and content executives from around the world converge to, there's a gravitational pull to get to LA, but it's less about the screenings itself, and it's more about the networking and the opportunities that you may have. And as a result of all the things that we may talk about down the track, Toby, which is consolidation and vertical integration and all those things, it becomes more a market where it converges buyers to have meaningful meetings with, whether it's producers or studios. It might be a moment for a buyer to, or a network or a platform to come to LA and have renewal conversations with studios. So, have face-to-face meetings rather than on Zoom, because that's also important. You have much more what I would say is, there's much more integrity in the room when you are face to face rather than on a Zoom. So I think
I guess the reality is there's like there's a lot less shows actually
there's a lot
able
less
to
shows
screen.
available to screen or buy
Yeah,
or be
yeah,
available.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
there's like clearly a consolidation in the market or there are things that are happening in the market that are creating reasons that structurally are evolving the LA screenings as an event. And that
yes, yeah,
is availability of content. It is the the consolidation piece. I mean, I have to say, and look, I can say this candidly, that the Paramount and Warner Brothers merger was hardly discussed in LA when I was present there for 2 weeks, although it was an not ominous, but it was a presence in the
right,
background that everyone
yeah,
was talking
yeah,
about and feeling that what is this going to mean next year? I mean, what does
yeah,
that actually mean for the Warner Brothers Discovery screenings next year? What does it mean for the Paramount screenings next year?
yeah,
I think there are real sort of practical questions that buyers and commissioners were asking when we were present in the market this year.
yeah. Because
And
the
those
interesting
things are
thing is
still
that
unsolved. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I mean the interesting thing is, if you look back at the Warner Brothers screening, 10 years
Yeah.
ago, you'd
Yeah.
have been going to the lot, spending
Yeah.
a whole day there watching,
Yes. A
you know,
whole day, Toby.
a lot of shows, and so now, I don't know, typical, studios, they don't have a whole day of shows to show
Toby,
screen.
you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of just volume. So yes, you even go. I think you're right. About 10 years, because you've got the sort of post-COVID piece, which is
Yeah,
5 years. But if you go back 10 years, and I think that's a fair sort of like benchmark in terms of if you go back 10 years, you're absolutely right. You would sit at Warner Brothers and please, for anyone listening, it's an absolute privilege and like a grateful opportunity to go to a screening and sit there for a whole day and watch, the best of what Warner Brothers have. So it was always a privilege from my perspective to do that. And then you would walk out of that day and you'd go, okay, what's available? You'd get clear guidance from your local or, sales rep that what was available. And then you would sort of go back to Sydney or, and this is just from my perspective, you go back to Sydney and then you sort of like work out what is available, can we bid for, what is right for our audience, what's right for our platform, all those things. But now those conversations don't happen. You go to like this year, a buyer would have gone to the Warner Brothers Discovery screening and gone, oh wow, there were 3 great shows or 4 great shows screened, but none of them are available. So all we're doing now is getting a market perspective of what the
yeah,
content looks like
yeah,
and what
yeah.
we might be potentially up against. So it's a bit of a market research process rather than an actual buying trip. And they're the intricacies that have sort of evolved and changed. To go back to your original question, what was my overall impression of LA screenings and what has evolved? It's become less transactional and more relationship, I think.
Right, right, right. And I guess one of the other factors is just the whole cycle of the kind of pilots. That doesn't really happen, anymore. So shows are just not all shows are just not all ready to view at that time of year. So that's, I guess, another kind of impact.
Well, I think you're right. Yeah, I think the whole idea of pilot season, and this is an
Good name.
unashamed plug here, but no, I actually, the reason why, well, I actually have to say my wife and I came up with this name for our business was pilot season, is because pilot season was such a endearing term for a moment in time when people would come to, as we're talking about LA
Yeah.
and deal with and engage and really get involved with pilot season. And so, well, the pilot season that the US networks used to get involved in. And
Yeah.
I felt there was a nice duality there. Anyway, not about me and self-promotion, but more about just like, I think it's like it's evolved so much, hasn't it? It's like you're not watching pilots now, you're watching clips, you're watching promos, you're watching trailers, you're actually watching talent come out and try and push shows. So the whole concept of a pilot being presented to buyers at the LA screenings is very different now. Very different.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting that, really it would seem to me like the London screenings is more about screening than the LA screenings. There seems to be like there's a lot more new content to watch there.
I think that's a really interesting statement. I think my perspective on that is less so about geography, less so about London and LA. I think it's more about, for me, it's about where this is. Okay, again, my own personal opinion. I think this is about where certain markets and certain countries are becoming more innovative or leaning into partnerships and collaboration versus being very, and I have to say this carefully, but being very inward and self-reflexive. And what I mean by that is I love the fact that the London screenings is now becoming a very international market because you have all the Hollywood studios plus the original, as you know, the original foundation members of the London screenings, and I think I can name them, but it's Banijay, it's All3Media, it's Fremantle, it's ITV Studios. Who am I missing?
Well,
I think it's
kind of
those core ones.
BBC Studios.
Well, no. To correct that, to clarify that, BBC Studios or BBC was always BBC Liverpool. The BBC. What was it called? BBC Showcase. That was always separate. And then Showcase came to London, but it was separate to the London screenings.
Yeah.
So I think we have to clarify that. Anyway, my point being is that you've got a number of studios and originators of the London screenings that have created a foundation market that is now very buoyant and has become more of a screening market than what the LA screenings is. And I think that's, as I said, two things. One thing is geography. And the second thing is where I think the UK market have woken up to the need to collaborate and partner and create co-productions and really be collaborative rather than just be a market. Please, no disrespect to the US market, but a market that always was looking inward rather than outwards. And now I think the US market and LA screenings has become more of an outward-looking market. We can touch on that, but I think it's a step behind what London screenings is at now. And then there's proximity of the time. London screenings happens in late February. LA screenings is in May. There's not a lot of time, or not a lot of water under the bridge. So a lot of buyers can go to London screenings and be satiated by what is available there, and potentially, travel budgets and all those things are an impact on businesses. And maybe some buyers might say, we can do London screenings and maybe we can save on cost. This is a pragmatic view, but not go to LA. And these are the sort of interesting sort of dynamics.
Seeing everybody at MIPCOM.
At MIPCOM in October. So it's a really interesting time in terms of where the content is, where the money goes, where the buyers go and where the buyers place their influence. And yeah, I can see that objectively now because, I always wanted to be at everything, but at the same time, you can't be at everything.
Yeah. No, I'm the same as you. I like to be at every show there is. I really like it. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think there are? It's difficult to kind of quantify the numbers, but do you think there are considerably less people going to the LA screenings now? Do you think? Are there less organisations going, or is it about organisations still going, but they're just sending a lot less people? Or do you think it's pretty stable? There's still the same numbers of people, going, and they love, I know a lot, who doesn't like to go to LA in May? It's pretty nice, but I'm just interested in your view on kind of, volumes of people.
I certainly don't want to make assumptions. However, and obviously I'm not leaning into hard data here, but I do get the impression that LA Screenings has suffered, has less attendees, based on the fact that there's less content to view. I think it's sort of like it's like a direct variable, direct connection there. Having said that, I cannot, Toby, I'm not going to, tell you I have the data and I know who attends LA screenings and I know who attends London screenings. Although I can certainly tell you based on, my own personal interactions with the studios and also personally attending all the different screening events. I do feel that there is certainly a positive momentum pushing towards the London screenings, and I think that and as I said before, it's probably based on a number of variables. It's probably content. Does the London screenings have an advantage based on its time in the year where you're late February versus May? Now that plays to different production cycles and all that, but obviously
exactly.
And I think the studios can control that. They can hold back content or provide content for certain markets.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there are also as I said, fundamental housekeeping issues that some buyers have to deal with. Can we go to London? Can we go to LA? Can we send teams to both and still run a viable business?
Exactly, because some of the kind of people running acquisitions teams that I've spoken to say, well, for London they've got to bring quite a big team because there is so much there, and there's a lot of clashing events and screenings and stuff.
To cover.
You can't 100%. Do it with just you got to send one person to the London screenings and get them to watch everything. It's just physically not possible. I think
there are choices. There are choices that need to be made by buyers and broadcasters and streamers. They need to make choices.
Yeah. So in jumping back, specifically to the LA screenings, from a content point of view, were there any kind of standout highlights for you in terms of shows that you thought, hey, that's a really interesting show, that is going to be a hit, or for that matter, themes in terms of, from a content point of view of, there was quite a few shows of this genre popping up, or this particular, kind of type of IP, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It's my favorite question, Toby. No, it really is. It's about sort of what we do or what I do. It's about the content, the stories. Okay. I think the most logical way for me to answer that is sort of break it down based on studio or based on who made what and who provided what, because it's always good to say, oh, this was a fantastic series here and this, that, here. But for me, it's sort of very logical because I go through, well, who I screened and what I saw. So I'll take you through that, and I'll try and be brief. I know I can be verbose, but
no, this is super interesting. So take your time.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to start with I'm going to start with ITV Studios because actually, for a reason for that, because that was the first studio I started with that I screened with. And so ITV Studios had some really interesting projects that I felt were or what are going to become the definition of what the LA screening is going to become, which is co-productions. It's getting partners on board early to deliver high premium content that is going to travel internationally. And I hope for their sake it does. But I was privy to a couple of series at ITV Studios. So one that I really, really liked was The Party. But again, I'm narrowing my field because you've got to understand that, I also look at I also still look at content from a premium perspective. What's great storytelling and what's great character. And so I think I can talk to both the premium and distinctive content, and then the broad and networky shows as well. But I loved what ITV had to offer. They had a really great series called The Party, which was, like it was sort of political, but had a journalistic angle. But ultimately, it was like a series that played to, really, really, characters that had, flaws, but played to the audience's lust for watching what potentially can go wrong if through a sort of like high society world. I'm probably not giving it the best pitch, but I just loved the fact that it had Tom Cullen in a role that was just delicious, and I was really looking forward to that one. And then another series that also I felt ITV presented really well, but they didn't have, and this is the thing now about LA screenings, is you're not going to get full pilots.
Right.
You're not getting full pilots. You're getting clips and teasers and EPKs. Electronic press kits. With the cast talking about the show. But I really did like the look of Number 10, which is a series that I think will be I think it's with Channel 4 down the track later this year, which is looking inside 10 Downing Street. And, like I think it's a series that will obviously play beautifully to the UK audience, but whether it has international appeal, that's the question. That's a question mark. But again, I still loved it. I watched it because it was premium and salacious and so well cast. And so, I go, to my first screening event in the LA screenings, and I see a lots of British content. But at the same time, I went, wow, this is like really impactful and really, 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 um, I think, and available,
Yeah.
available to buyers.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
differentiation. It's available. Um, I then lean into NBC Universal. So NBC Universal again had a, a really diverse range of content. And that's what I like about a studio that can have something for everyone. So without going into too much detail, but NBC Universal had a wonderful series, a sort of like a sci-fi slash thriller series called Possession that I think is available. I think it was built for Sky and Peacock, but I think it's just going to stand out amongst the crowd. They had an incredible network series called In the Line of Fire. Line of Fire, which is sort of slightly based on the movie, but new characters, and it's a political sort of assassination thriller, but set amongst the family that are all involved in the sort of the sort of political and CIA world of protecting politicians, but I just loved the world it built. And then I suppose the last one, well, actually two other ones from NBC Universal that I really did feel they can cut through is one called The Siege, which your listeners can look at, and but it was David Morrissey in the lead role. David, he's been in so many projects, but he brings such an incredible sort of pedigree to the project. But I sort of love the pedigree and the sort of people behind that. It's based on a Ben McIntyre book. So he
Right.
was obviously Ben McIntyre wrote, what SAS
Yeah.
Rogue Heroes was
Rogue
based
Heroes.
on, and
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
the other one, Ben McIntyre also wrote a Spy Among Friends that
Right.
Sony
Yeah.
developed. So he comes from a pedigree. But anyway, my point is that Universal had a really, really good range of content that
Yeah.
worked for a number of different buyers, and then a comedy that I thought was, well, I mean, you've got to go with it, which was a comedy with so it was Hugh Laurie and also Amy Poehler, and it was a series called Dig, which was from the creators of Parks and Recreation and The Good Place, and it was just a nice, unique comedy that made for Peacock, delivered by Universal Television, and I think it has legs. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to sort of see from one hand what ITV Studios presented on one day, and then what a big player like NBC Universal presented was really interesting. And then when you go across this whole landscape of what the LA screenings presented, I think that there was also a really interesting slate that Warner Brothers Discovery provided. The challenge with that was, Toby, not a lot that was available, as I spoke to.
Right.
So they had some really, really good content that was built for HBO Max, but a lot of them, from a buyer's perspective, was not available. I loved what Paramount provided. They had a really strong network series called Einstein, which I think will pop in terms of sort of its appeal, and again, understanding what, if it's available for sort of international buyers. Einstein was sort of unique and had a really sort of nice tone to it, sort of almost like a co-viewing experience for a lot of viewers and your listeners, but something that I think will resonate internationally. It's really interesting. I sort of stood back, and I was actually not invited to the Sony screening, but I heard they didn't have a screening. They just had a couple of cast and talent
Right.
present a few ideas, but I heard there was great resonance from a couple of projects. So one was a project which was called American Hostage with John Hamm, which
Right.
had good word of mouth,
Yeah.
and then another one which was with Glenn Close, which is a Channel 4 series called Up to No Good. So they both had really good buzz, but there was nothing to see, and personally, I wasn't at the screening myself. So, just to give your sort of
Yeah.
your
It's funny, you
listeners
can
a
have
sense of
you can now
yeah.
you can have an event that's just called a screening, but there's no screening going on. So
There's no screening going on. And then one last shout out I have to do is there was incredible buzz for a little remake of a little show called Baywatch. I think, Toby, you're in LA, you're close to Malibu or close to Santa Monica.
yeah.
You're sitting there, indulging in incredible studio screenings. And then there's I wouldn't say little, an incredible distributor, Fremantle, who have a project called Baywatch. And I absolutely felt the heat and the demand for that show. I think nostalgia, I think an easy watch in the
Yeah.
times we're going through. The world is at a perilous place, and I don't want to get too, too deep, but I have to say we work in a business that's about entertainment, and I think Baywatch via Fremantle is going to deliver the goods for a lot of
Yeah.
territories
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
lot of our audience, because it's sort of what the world needs. A bit of, leave your brain at the door, entertainment. They've gone high budget and high gloss, and it looks amazing. And I give full props and credit to Fremantle to bring that show to market. I think they're going to, reap the rewards of a really, really smart idea that taps into nostalgia, but also taps into what the audience may be looking for right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. A number of years ago, they remastered the original series, and then started building fast channels with it.
Fast channels around that.
Yeah.
And
so
I've
there's a
heard it's been
Baywatch
one of the
channel kind of everywhere. Yeah,
most successful fast channel in the world. So
yeah, yeah. So it'd be interesting to just kind of to try to to understand how much the fast channel and the kind of sort of relaunch of the original series in a way like that contributed to them being able to to get that deal with Fox to to do the reboot, because it's certainly you're not starting from the beginning in terms of in terms of kind of brand awareness. So I would imagine that's was pretty helpful.
I sort of I'm really interested in that sort of the sort of craft and the sort of idea and then the business model behind that. And I think my view is you're right. The sort of fast channel maybe created awareness for the old franchise. However, the audience will watch what they want. You
Yes.
can't sort of say, oh, the fast channel created the demand for this new series. The new series will live and die on its own, its
Yeah.
own
Yes.
pedigree and
Yeah.
its own
Yeah.
teller. So I think we can, you and I think we love this industry, but at the same time, I think the audience are very aware. And I think they will make the decision whether this becomes a success or not, irrespective of the fast, the
Yeah.
fast
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
reignition of the old brand. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think maybe we'll have to get Jens Richter, who's becoming
Yes.
becoming a regular on the podcast. We'll get him back on
Oh,
maybe
let's
towards
do Jens and I
maybe
together.
after maybe after MIPCOM or something like that, and see see what he has to tell us about Baywatch then.
I'd love to do one with Jens, Toby.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah. That would be really cool. So maybe just to kind of wrap up, focusing again at the at the screenings. What do you think? What do you think the future of the LA screenings is? How do you think it will evolve in the next couple of years? Do you think it's here to stay, or might it be something that goes away and kind of loses its relevance, and London screenings just become bigger and bigger and bigger? What's kind of, maybe I can ask you what's your prediction and what's your wish?
Okay, so that's a really good question again. Look, my prediction it will stay for a while. As I said earlier, I think it's a really important market for the industry in terms of connection. In terms of that connected tissue, and what I mean by that in terms of, again, how the LA screenings has evolved from pretty much turn up to LA, sit in a dark theater and watch content. That's what it was. And then go to a dinner with your partners and, your distributor partners, studio partners. That was it. And that was a routine, wasn't it? It was like, Sunday through to the Friday.
Yeah, and if you were on the sales side like I was, it was like you do the screenings, your clients come, they go, you take them into they go and sit in the dark. You then wait around outside for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Wait
for a while. You ask them what they thought.
Yeah, and they probably said all the shows were really bad. I don't know. I mean, anyway.
And then you do the same the next day.
I know.
Yeah.
No, but all seriousness, I think the screenings has evolved from a sit and watch event to now a sit and network event.
Yeah.
It literally is. You come there to, do face-to-face meetings with the studios and with your partners. I'm talking from a buyer's perspective.
Yes.
Please, for everyone listening, it's from a buyer's perspective. You're going to LA to meet with your studio partners. You're meeting with production partners and distributor partners. They don't all have to be studios, but it's a convergence of people from around the world. So you're also meeting with other partners that are in different territories. And this is the key. I think LA Screenings has become a networking event where someone from Australia can meet someone from Germany and someone from Ireland or someone from the UK and get together and start to do business together. It's a
Yeah.
connected piece,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
is really important. So the value of the LA Screenings has moved upstream. That's what I mean. It's moved upstream. It's not becoming a sit and watch market now. It's becoming, how do we as buyers or commissioners get together with other partners and collaborate? So let me demonstrate that by example. 3 or 4 years ago, probably just post-COVID, when the LA Screenings re-emerged, I spent half of my schedule meeting with my partners or collaborative, partners at Hulu or AMC or FX. This is an Australian buyer meeting with platforms over there to see how we can share intel, work on projects together, find ways to collaborate, and I would also do the screenings. But 10 years before that, it was just going over there to do the screenings. I think demonstrating by example it's become more upstream. And I think that's the value in the LA Screenings. It becomes a hub now. It becomes an area where people will come in and, because everyone's understanding what's not available now. The vertical integration, the consolidation is creating a different definition of what the LA Screenings means. And then you also start to understand what the content is coming out of the LA Screening. What you are watching. This year we saw lots of procedurals. The procedural volume was quite high, and that can be sometimes, obviously buyers have many sort of different tastes, story tastes, and different ways of assessing content. But high procedural volume can turn away a lot of buyers. So then you sort of also start to reassess of what the LA Screenings means to, to different parties who are coming and converging internationally to that place. So, I think that it will continue to evolve. I think it will still continue to be relevant until, Toby, there is nothing left to screen. and that's a far-fetched statement, but are we getting there? Are we getting to 2 or 3 years time when the LA Screenings becomes a Paramount Warner Brothers, event? What will they screen to buyers? What happens to the future of Disney? Where are Peacock going to be? What are NBCU's plans? What does it look like in terms of, the future landscape, and what does that market provide in terms of ROI? So I think everyone's sort of assessing as they attend. But for now, I think it's a hub that draws people in, that creates a moment for people to get together. But I think, as I said, the value has moved upstream. It's about co-productions. It's about partnerships. I mean, I was there for a reason. It was to get involved in those conversations.
Yeah.
As much as I love screening the content, I was there to be involved with those conversations because I know that's where the convergence is. So, yeah, we everyone needs to adapt, and that's what I think is happening. And the question, finally, your bit about London versus LA, I don't think there's. I think they can both exist separately. The question is, which one will evolve faster and become more relevant, and which one, you can sort of sense where I'm getting at. But that's it. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic, Peter. Thank you very much for everything you've shared there. It's really, really interesting and insightful. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And I think, to me, it seems like we should probably do this again at the same time next year and assess what has happened, because most likely we're going to have that Paramount Warner combination, up and running by then, which will be a significant impact on the market, and who knows what else will be happening then. So So I think it's certainly a really interesting time in the business. But thank you again for your insights. I'm sure our listeners are really gonna get a lot out of this conversation.
Thanks so much, Toby. I look forward to part 2 with you next year.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Inside Content, the TV industry podcast brought to you by 3Vision. With decades of TV industry experience and real-world success, we know the ins and outs of the market like nobody else. To learn more about our TV consultancy services, head to 3vision.tv.